So today, Smogon opened a whole new can of worms in terms of a discussion about sleep in OU, and more generally, I suppose, sleep in Smogon competitive in general, and its place in the metagame. So sleep has always been an annoying status, and even after Game Freak fixed it up a bit in Generation 6, his Generation 5 sleep is just awful, and I hate Generation 5 sleep. But Generation 6 and beyond has always been a put the Pokemon to sleep, then you get 1 to 3 turns, and then they wake up, right? Which is a lot more fair than Gen 5 and Gen 1, which was also quite bad. But really, despite that being somewhat okay, there's a lot of random elements to it, specifically the amount of turns you'll stay asleep. And so you could get a 3-turn sleep, which will really hurt you, or you could get a first turn wake, which as the Pokemon that's asleep, that's really useful for you. So there's that RNG. Okay, so you get that amount of chance. The other thing that doesn't help Sleep's case as being potentially broken is the fact that it is usually not very accurate. The only accurate sleep move is Spore, which since Generation 6 has been able to be blocked by Grass-type Pokemon, and also can be blocked by Pokemon like Mandibuzz, which have Overcoat. So today I want to just quickly ramble about what I feel about how broken sleep is and whether it should be banned. I'm not scripting this video, I'm just throwing it out there because I want to get my ideas on paper, as it were, and be able to share that with you. So in the background, you're going to see some games that I played today with Gengar and UU with Hypnosis, because Hypnosis is one of the main ways to put up something to sleep, and the Smogon Council is arguing that even if you have Hypnosis, that is somehow busted or ban-worthy potentially. So I just want to discuss that while the gameplay goes on in the background, so you can watch the gameplay or not. You can mute me or put the gameplay down. Pick your poison. Anyway, so I would like to just go over a few of the points that the council brought up, and I'll link the post down below in the description. Probably most of you have already seen it. I think that what their problems are with sleep can be broken down into about 4 categories. The first category is Darkrai, then what I'd classify as fast Pokemon with sleep moves. Amoonguss specifically gets its own category, and then finally, I would say Quiver Dancers is the final category. And I do not think that Pokemon like Venusaur merit much discussion at all. And I'll just quickly mention here why. They argue that Venusaur has become more popular to run with Sleep Powder, and that's a problem. But this is not really that big of a deal, and there's a few issues with it. First of all, Venusaur's always had Sleep Powder, and so if this were really a broken, ban-worthy set, then it would have been running it in previous generations. There's not too much that's changed in this generation. There's only maybe 2 things that have changed. One, Tapu Koko is not in the tier, so you don't have electric terrain. And I'll bring back Tapu Koko as we continue to discuss. The second one maybe is that Heatran is not very used. And Heatran forces you to run Earth Power. And that's about it. Venusaur doesn't necessarily want to be running Sleep Powder, because if it wants to run Growth on its Sun team, then it only gets 2 moves to run. You can run Giga Drain or Sludge Bomb or Weather Ball / Terra Blast or whatever, and you can run Earth Power. But you can't run all of those, and you need all of them at various times. But you can only run 2 of them. So, if you run Sleep Powder. If you don't run Sleep Powder, you can run 3 of them, and that gives you a lot better chance of sweeping, as long as you actually get to put them to sleep. Sleep powder is also 75 base accuracy, so good luck hitting that. And if you have to hit that move to get your sweep off, I think I'd rather take the status personally. And I don't think that Pokemon like Hisuian Lilligant or Brute Bonnet are really that broken that the tier can't handle them. I mean, Brute Bonnet is NU, and Hisuian Lilligant is a little bit scary, but personally, I'm not terribly worried about it. And if Sleep Powder plus Victory Dance, Hisuian Lilligant is that busted, despite Pokemon like Skarmory running around, then I do think that you should just consider that one Pokemon by itself. But really, like I said, I don't want to talk too much about those guys. I don't think that that's that big of a deal. I do want to talk about the other 4 categories, though. Let's start off with Darkrai. Darkrai, when it first came out, people were saying, man, this Pokemon's really mid. It really is not that threatening. And I agree with them. Darkrai is pretty bad. The only way you can make Darkrai anywhere interesting is if you use a sleep move. The reason for this, Darkrai, if it's not using sleep, is just a stat stick. It's got good special attack, and it's got fantastic speed. That's it. That's all it's got going for it. Doesn't have an ability, effectively, if you aren't using sleep. But as soon as you do introduce the sleep factor, then Darkrai not only puts the Pokemon across from asleep, but the Bad Dreams abilities start going to chip the opponent down, which aids in Darkrai's middling special attack stat, and really just frustrates the opponent as they try to pivot. So I do think that that's where Darkrai shines. However, because of the Dark Void nerf, then you have to use Hypnosis, which is really not good. I think if Dark Void were not nerfed and it was still 80% accurate, I don't think Darkrai would be OU. I think it would definitely be Ubers. But even with Hypnosis, people are saying, oh, this set is super busted. And specifically, I've heard people talking about the lead with Focus Sash and Hypnosis set. Because you have a Focus Sash and you're super fast, you're going to get off your Hypnosis and then you're going to chip the guy down. Then you can start setting up or just throwing off attacks, and they're going to have to go into another guy. And if you still have your Focus Sash, it's even worse. And oh man, how are you supposed to stop this? And I'm not going to sit here and say, we'll just run Vital Spirit, because that's not going to be good. That's not a good option, because if you're forced to run a trash Pokemon just to counter a broken strategy, that is indicative of an unhealthy metagame. So is that a problem? Yeah, that is a problem if Darkrai hits. But Darkrai hitting is only a 60% chance. If your opponent leads with priority and gets to 2-shot you, because Darkrai doesn't have that good of bulk, especially physical bulk, then you have an even bigger problem where now Darkrai is only going to be able to have 1 Hypnosis chance, where at least with the Focus Sash you could have 2. That's a 60% chance. It's a little bit better than a coin flip. And with the amount of complaining people do about Hurricane and Focus Blast and things like that, it's a wonder to me that anybody wants to use this Hypnosis move when just as likely as not, it's going to miss. But the benefit to Darkrai when it hits is more significant than it is on other Pokemon, because now it gets to use its ability, and Dark Dreams isn't bad as an ability once the opposing Pokemon is asleep. So I would say it's cheese, but it can be annoying if it hits, because you're going to get that Bad Dreams off. Then you're going to also have initiative as to, do I want to switch? Do I want to stay in a nasty plot? Do I want to just throw off attacks? Right, I'm in the driver's seat now, and you're going to want to have to pivot unless you want to take more Bad Dreams. So I do think that Darkrai is annoying, and if it gets going, it can be potentially busted. But it still is RNG-based Pokemon. Now, I do think that on the RNG note, Smogon's whole thing is that we want to take away as many of those coin flippy kind of things as possible. And that's why they banned OHKO moves like Fissure, because you can spam Fissure and Sheer Cold, and if I had a Choice Scarf, Sheer Cold Pokemon, I could just sweep an entire team as long as I don't have Sturdy or an Ice type or whatever, right? If I get lucky. So that's the rub right there. If I get lucky. And Smogon says the better player should be consistently winning their games, and you shouldn't be subjected to cheese. The problem is how far do you want to take that mentality? So banning OHKO moves is something that most people that play Smogon can get behind. But also is a thing that a lot of people who don't like Smogon specifically cite as an example of why they dislike Smogon and that mentality. They say that Pokemon is an RNG-based game. This is one of the things that Pokemon gives us. I should be allowed to use it. And people who play Battle Stadium singles and VGC, the better players can usually still win despite all of those strategies totally being available, right? It just takes the amount of games to go up for that luck-based factor to be mitigated. And any serious VGC player is not going to be running an OHKO move because it has a really bad chance at victory. The only time OHKO moves ever come into VGC is when the metagame gets into a really bad spot, like it did with Dondozo there for a bit, where it was just so hard to kill and they had to find some way around it. But the metagame shifted in large part due to the introduction of new Pokemon, and they were able to get out of that rut that they were in. I know nobody runs OHKO moves despite them totally being legal, because cheese is bad at the end of the day. And the worse the cheese is, the less likely people are to run it. And I do think that Darkrai with Hypnosis is cheese. Just because it's cheese, though, doesn't mean that it's not annoying, and it doesn't mean that you can't hack your opponent and get a cheapo win out of it. So I do think that's something to consider. But I also think that 60% accurate moves, that's about the same as Jirachi's Ironhead. And we don't see anybody complaining about Ironhead. And if they do, then they've already left Smogon. Alright, moving on to our second group. We have the fast Pokemon with Hypnosis. And in this group, we have Iron Valiant and Alolan Ninetales. This was the inspiration for the team that you see playing in the background, because Gengar is another pretty fast Pokemon with Hypnosis. And so if you combine that with the Sash Darkrai lead, now you have the combination of those two ideas put together. I don't think Hypnosis on Iron Valiant is particularly compelling for a couple of reasons. First of all, because similar to Venusaur, Iron Valiant really does like coverage. The only time you eschew coverage is if you are running something like Calm Mind or Encore. And even then, the Calm Mind sets usually run like, I guess sometimes they run 2 attacks with Calm Mind and Encore. But Encore is just such a good move for Iron Valiant specifically, especially against Pokemon like King Gambit. And and Calm Mind, of course, is good for just the breaking power. But I don't see the benefit to Hypnosis when you're not a particularly sturdy Pokemon. So you're going to take a hit, maybe, and then you're going to die. And getting Hypnosis off so that you can then you don't have a Nasty Plot. If it had Nasty Plot, I could see Nasty Plot 2 attacks with Hypnosis, and all of a sudden I'm just breaking through your entire team. But if I don't have the immediate breaking power because you went into something that checks me like Golden Go or something, right? Then I'm just gonna have to switch out. So it would have been better to have had the Shadow Ball for Golden Go or other moves that might have had more overall utility. So it seems, again, like cheesy, and I don't really see it being particularly strong. Yeah, it'll catch your opponent off guard, because they're going to be like, what? Who runs Hypnosis? But if it were really that good of a move, then you would have seen it more often in the past. And I don't see what has happened in the metagame now that makes this move so much better. It's always existed on it. Why have we not seen it before if it's so immediately obviously apparent? Alolan Ninetales, because of the snow defense boost, you can run Hypnosis, and this is something that has been ran on Ninetales in the past. But I would argue in this instance, that's more so because Alolan Ninetales isn't immediately powerful on its own, and prefers to run other moves to force its opponent to switch. like Encore or Hypnosis, and then it's going to have maybe Moonblast or Freeze Dry, and then Aurora Veil, of course. So it's always had Hypnosis, and that's annoying. But if Hypnosis on Alolan Ninetales is so busted, then why didn't we deal with it back in Gen 8? What has changed? Again, Tapu Koko maybe is a difference there. But I feel like it's just one of those things that you go into a Pokemon that you're okay getting put to sleep, and that also can pressure the incoming setup Pokemon. And that's the kind of play you should make. And if your team doesn't have something for that, if it's good in the metagame, then isn't that more of a team building problem? Let's talk about Amoonguss now, moving on from the fast Pokemon to the Amoonguss slot. Amoonguss has always had Spore, which is the best sleep move you can have. But the problem with that, of course, is that grass types are immune to Spore. Amoonguss is a poison type, though, and can threaten those incoming grass types with Sludge Bomb or Clear Smog or whatever. So the only real Pokemon that can switch into Amoonguss and not get put to sleep, it would be something like Mandibuzz, which has Overcoat and doesn't really care about Sludge Bomb or anything else like that. So that's fair. And we don't have Tapu Koko putting up terrain, and we don't have other Pokemon like Heatran that can come in and go to sleep, but then still blank all of Amoonguss's other attacks unless it's a weird Stomping Tantrum set. We don't have Ferrothorn, which of course Ferrothorn completely makes Amoonguss struggle because it can't do anything to Ferrothorn. But I don't really know what's made Amoonguss so annoying. The one thing that they do talk about is they say that nowadays they've started running Lead Amoonguss with Red Card and Spore. If you hit me, then I'm going to force you to switch into a random Pokemon, and that Pokemon's going to go to sleep. And so that's annoying if I go into a Booster Energy Pokemon in the back, because then unless I stay in, let's say I'm an Iron Valiant, what am I going to stay in on Amoonguss? No, I'm going to have to switch. And now I've burned my Booster Energy. But frankly, if this is the problem, that sounds more like a Red Card problem, because I could lead off with any bulky Pokemon with a Red Card. And yeah, I can't Spore them, but I could definitely start burning Booster Energies with Red Card in that way. And I definitely think you could play around with that in some annoying ways. Like if, let's say you had Red Card plus Whirlwind, you put it on a bulky Pokemon like Tinglu, lead off with it. Your opponent hits you with an attack, and the Red Card goes up. They go into a random Pokemon. I Whirlwind to that same turn. If they went into a booster Pokemon, now that booster's burned. I could definitely do something like that too. So I don't necessarily see this being a sleep-specific thing. And also, frankly, I'm not too sympathetic to the booster Pokemon getting their Booster Energy burned, because those Pokemon have often been the broken guys anyway. Right? Iron Valiant has been on the radar so many times, and Iron Moth was really annoying, especially at the end of DLC 1. Great Tusk has ruled OU this entire generation. Really, I'm not too sympathetic to the booster guys saying, oh no, you've burned my Booster Energy. Yeah, I have. Run a different item if you don't want that to happen. You know? It just seems like that seems more like a balancing thing. Finally, let's talk about the Quiver Dance Pokemon. Pokemon like Vivian and Venomoth will run Quiver Dance and Sleep Powder. Vivian especially is annoying because Sleep Powder, like I said before, is 75 accuracy. Is not that great of an accuracy, but with Compound Eyes, now you bring it up above 80%. That's actually a very decent chance to put a Pokemon to sleep, and it gives you a chance to get 1 or 2 Quiver Dances. And if you get those Quiver Dances up, you can sweep entire teams. And that is annoying. And I really don't like playing against Vivian when I run into it in lower tiers for that very reason. Again, I would point to the fact that this is something that's always existed. And so what's the thing that's changed in this generation to say that that's ban worthy. Now, the tier, the council didn't really specifically mention that so much. The sleep powder plus quiver dance. So I don't want to put words in their mouth. But I will say that that is something else that would have to be considered. Is that banned worthy? Is that broken? Or is that sufficiently RNG based that it's not conducive to a healthy metagame? If that's always existed, why are we banning it now? Because not much has changed. And also I would point to the fact that most, if not all, of the Quiver Dance Pokemon, they always fall down to the very low tiers. If this were a broken strategy, then it would be used in higher tiers. But clearly, it even Pokemon in NU can handle most of the Quiver Dance Sleep Powder Pokemon. And if that's the case, then you know that's not a problematic strategy at all. So at the end of the day, I think that it comes down to a few questions. First of all, why are we testing it now as opposed to before? Is this just because there are certain people in the council or in the administration of Smogon that personally dislike it, and now because they have the power to speak out about it, they get to set the terms of the discussion, and now the community has to respond in kind? If these people had never come to power, would we just go up along our merry way? In which case, that seems more like a political question than a metagame question. However, if there is something specific that can be pointed to besides Darkrai, because if it is just Darkrai, then just ban Darkrai. But if there's something besides Darkrai that's specifically a problem, then I would say let's look into that, because that seems like that would be the most important thing. I will also say that if sleep were really a problem, then, and like it moves like Hypnosis were a problem, then Pokemon like Glade and Gardevoir would be running Hypnosis. Yeah, now I Hypnosis I get to have a free switch, or I get to set up a Swords Dance. But you don't see very many Pokemon running it. Most of the Pokemon that are running it either have Spore or are already really good Pokemon that are threatening a lot of pressure besides. In which case, that seems more like it's specific to those Pokemon. And if those Pokemon running those sets is what makes them broken, well, fine, ban those Pokemon. I don't think that's a problem. If at the end of the day, Smogon is just coming out and saying this is something that's RNG based and we want to ban it because it's RNG based, then what I want to hear from people who can come up with a reasonable argument is, why are we banning this RNG based specific thing and not other RNG based things, right? I previously mentioned Ironhead Jirachi as something that is very heavily RNG based. If you use Choice Scarf Ironhead Jirachi, you are praying for hacks. You're praying for flinches. That's uncompetitive. And you can win games that way, as we've seen. You run moves like Discharge or even Thunder Wave. The entire concept of paralysis is also very luck based. If it were just for the speed drop, then that would be one thing. But having the chance to not attack at all, that's something that's RNG based. What about Quick Claw? Why is Quick Claw not banned? We've banned King's Rock in the past, but we haven't banned Quick Claw. This is another move or item that can just hack your opponent, and you can just block the heck out of them, and the best player might not win in that particular game. So if that's your mentality, then you need to take the logical extreme. I guess I'm not saying that you have to ban Flamethrower because that's a 10% chance to burn, but you do need to be able to give us a clear delineation between what is acceptable amounts of levels of hacks in Pokemon and what is not acceptable levels. If you're saying the 1 to 3 sleep turns that you can get is too risky, is too RNG based, why is that too RNG based compared to some of the other things we can get? Why are we not banning freeze entirely? Now, is it because sleep is a combination of being very good at the moment and also is RNG based? I would say, why don't we look into finding ways to answer what's good at the moment and then come back to the idea of, is this RNG based? So I'd want to see a better argument presented as to what makes this actually ban-worthy, as opposed to what we have currently, which is not banning the mechanic, but is just banning spanning the mechanic, which I think is a lot more fair, because you're still allowing us to use the sleep mechanic, but you're not allowing the players to keep going over and over, to keep clicking it. One final note that the Smogon admins talk about is this idea that the Sleep Clause mod is a modification to in-cartridge behavior. So what happens currently on Showdown is that if you click Spore on a Pokemon, your opponent switches out, and then you click Spore again, because you've already put one Pokemon to sleep in the back, it's not going to allow you to do that again. And it'll instead just negate the move. And they're saying that this is a mod of actual cartridge behavior. And the quote here says, the argument of just don't click Spore after you put something to sleep doesn't really hold up. But in that case, I would argue that this is a very straw man argument. When you play on Showdown with Smogon rules, obviously you can play a custom battle and do whatever you want, or anything goes and do whatever you want. But if you're playing in a Smogon tier on Showdown, you are agreeing to play by a certain rule set. If I were to go on cartridge and say, battle an opponent and tell them, hey, I want to battle you using OU Smogon tournament rule sets, they would agree to that, and then we fight in the cartridge. If my opponent puts my Pokemon to sleep and then they put another guy to sleep, now they've cheated, because we agreed at the beginning of the battle that we'd be using Smogon OU rule set. And if they've done that, they forfeit the match. That's how it is in draft. If you break the rules, then you cheated and you forfeit the match. So if on Showdown, Sleep Clause activates and it doesn't allow another Pokemon to go to sleep, but allows you to continue to play, then isn't that actually, just sort of a nice thing to have? A way to say, hey, maybe you're an inexperienced player, maybe you just forgot. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but we're not going to allow this rule-breaking move to stand. So the only way you could say that the only difference you could say, and they do, I think this is what they're talking about. I'm pretty sure this is what they mean when they say this. If I were trying to PP stall you, I suppose, and I need to burn through all of my spores, I could PP stall you on Showdown using Spore, whereas in cartridge, I wouldn't be able to touch Spore because then I would be cheating and I'd be immediately disqualified. So if you're worried about that specific weird interaction, which I think is really nitpicking, then just get rid of the Sleep Clause in Showdown and make the opponent instantly lose the game if they press Spore twice, right? But I don't really think that that's what they're worried about. I think they're just bringing that up as an example to make it seem like it's a bigger problem than it is. I think that we haven't seen a compelling argument on why Spore or why Sleep should be banned. I think if Darkrai is a problem, then Darkrai can be banned, but you're just as likely to miss Hypnosis as you are to hit it. Yes, multiple successive Hypnosis will result in a higher probability overall of hitting it, and that is true. But then, as soon as I go to sleep, if you're a faster Pokemon and you put me to sleep, I've already burned my initial turn. You get to do something in the subsequent turn, and I get a first turn wake. It's like nothing even happened. So there's only a 60% chance to hit initially, right? And then there's only a 66% chance of getting anything good out of it, because I could just immediately wake up. Again, ignoring Darkrai's bad dreams. So I personally don't think that Sleep should be banned from Smogon. I think that it's part of the Pokemon game, and that it needs to be learn to be played around. I think if it's particularly good at the moment, then we need to ask why is it particularly good and how is the metagame shifted to make it stronger and how can we counter that? If it's not counterable, if we say the Darkrai on lead is just broken and there's nothing we can do about it, then maybe we ban Darkrai. But if lead Darkrai with Hypnosis is that broken, then we just go Gen 4 and run Lunberry on lead as an anti-lead, right? That's something we could totally do. And if this were Gen 4, that's what you would do. Because that's what all the leads in Gen 4 had to consider, right? And I know the Gen 4 leads is way different from what we have now, thanks to the team preview. But I do think that there's more creativity out there that can be brought about that will deal with Hypnosis and a lot of the other problems that people have. But that's my rambling, and that'll be it for today's video. Thanks for watching.